Welcome to the John Freakin' Muir Pod. Lace up those boots and sling on the pack for a romp through trails, short and long. With your host and Renaissance man, Doc. It's time to embrace the suck.
Welcome back to another week on the trail. I'm Doc, and this is the John Freakin' Muir Pod. Let's start off with a reminder. If you are enjoying the podcast, take just a minute, help us out, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. And if you're not enjoying the pod, well, just go ahead and keep that to yourself. All right, let's get to this week's content. Well, listeners, I have to say that I'm really excited to talk to my guest today. I always am, really, but today's guest is taking us back to the area we love, the JMT. I found him on Instagram under the handle JMT Guy, so I just had to reach out to him, and boy, am I glad I did. After he agreed to come on the pod, he shared that he was an author, and he sent me a copy of his book, which just blew me away. And we're going to talk about that book a little bit later, but welcome to the John Freakin' Muir Pod, Josh Endres.
Hey, man, glad to be here. Thank you so much for having me, Doc.
And
am I getting the
pronunciation of the last name correct?
That was perfect, man. Yeah.
Okay. Very good. Now, we usually go by trail names here on the podcast, but I understand that in 10 years in the Sierras, you have not picked up a trail name.
I didn't. I'm the same guy as I am on the trail as I am off the trail. So I don't know if that's the reason I never picked up one, or I did throw that out to my friends who had been with me back there a number of times, and they happily gave me some names to throw out your way. I don't think I'm going to share them, though, as they weren't exactly a label I want on myself.
Very good. You do have the right to refuse trail names if it doesn't fit. So there you go. All right. Well, for the sake of our podcast, then it's just Josh. So just Josh.
Josh, that's it, man.
Got it. Josh, have you listened to the podcast before?
A little bit, yeah. After you reached out to me, I checked it out. You've had some. You really had some awesome guests on here, and people doing just so much great work in the outdoors right now. It's I'm humbled to kind of be on it. So yeah, thank you.
And that tradition continues with this episode. I've got another great guest tonight, so really excited about that. Hey, I ask if you listen to the podcast, not to solicit feedback or compliments, but to make sure that you're aware of a regular segment that we have that is called the Pro Tip Insight of the Week. So as we get to the end of the episode, I'll turn to you and I'll ask Josh, what pro tip do you have for our listeners out there to make their next outdoor adventure even better? So
sure,
don't be surprised when we get there.
Okay.
Okay.
Freeze up, man.
And then another feature we've been doing this season is the must bring gear review. And here's how it works. If you were to let a stranger pack your bag with pretty much generic gear for a multi-day hike, what is the one specific piece of gear you would insist on being packed? And if you've got a particular brand for that specific piece of gear, even better. So Josh, what is your must bring piece of gear when you're heading out to the Sierras?
Right. Yeah. So as you mentioned, I'm a photographer. I am a photographer, and that kind of goes with a lot of extra gear many times. And so my pack is never light. And so I kind of gave up on I want to get it under 30 pounds because sometimes it's just not going to happen. But the one piece of equipment that makes a difference for me, and this is a small thing, but I think it goes a long way, are the right pair of socks. If your feet are comfortable, you will be better off. Way better off. So if you're not blistering, if your feet are breathing, and it's not like a super nice tent or something like that, but one brand that I've particularly came to really love is the Darn Tough socks. My feet breathe. I can wear them 3 days in a row and they still feel great. And I don't think my feet stink that bad afterwards either. So, that's a plus too, I suppose. But at any rate, if my feet are comfortable, I'm better. And that's an important piece for me.
Okay, so a couple things there. Number one is when we get off the trail, we really can't smell our own stink anymore. It's just, it's pervasive. And so
you can tell by the people's reaction around you usually.
That's right. So unless you're pulling those feet out of your shoes and sticking them up by someone's face, you probably don't know if they stink or not. So
Don't put it past me. I'm sure that's happened before.
Hey, are Darn Tough socks, are those toe socks or are those just like regular socks?
Regular socks. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, somebody, a previous guest, I think a couple of previous guests have talked about the Injinji toe socks.
Oh, I've never
how,
tried them.
how great
Yeah.
those are. So I got myself a couple of pair, and I'm going to be using them this summer on my hikes. So
Nice. Yeah,
looking-
I'll check it out as well. I'm always looking for the right answer there.
that's right.
So, yeah.
Gotta take care of the feet. Take care of the feet. The rest will follow. So.
Yes, exactly.
Also, want to go back to your comment about the weight of your pack and all the camera equipment. So it's safe to say we're not going to have an extended conversation here about ultralight practices on the trail with Josh tonight.
No. I wish, but no.
Yeah, but in terms of sleeping out there, I mean, are you a tent guy, a tarp guy? Do you cowboy camp? How does that work?
I usually bring a tent. If I'm solo, I'll bring a tent. I have a big Agnes actually that I use. I think it's a it's a one-person tent, and it works out well. It's maybe just over 2 pounds. But if I bring if another person is back there with me, we share regardless, and we'll figure that out. So
right.
That takes a burden off of me. And then, depending on what I'm doing, I may not bring a tent at all.
Oh, yeah. Really?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't mind sleeping under the stars.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
At a certain elevation where, critters aren't going to mess with you too much.
Right.
I'm cool with it. Yeah.
Very good. Now, the bag that you do carry with all that camera equipment, is it like a 60 liter or how big is it?
A 70 liter.
A 70 liter. Wow.
I carry a 70. Yeah, it's a Osprey Aether 70. I think, and even then, I still have stuff hanging off the sides of it. But it's been great. It fits. I've had it for probably close to 6 years now. I've still used the same pack, and so it's really held up well. I don't take it easy on those things, and but I typically I have besides the overnight gear and the food, which is fairly standard, in anyone's backpacking trip. It's about 15 pounds extra of lenses, tripods, and camera body.
Mm-hmm.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
Now, I know you're not a gear junkie, but anybody who has spent as much time out in the Sierras as you have, I mean, you obviously have some familiarity with gear. So how has gear changed? I know your book covers the span of 2010 to 2020. How has gear changed over those 10 years? When you started, what kind of evolution or what kind of changes have you made to your kit?
I mean, like most people, it would be weight. I think weight has just the stuff you're able to carry now. I mean, it is so much lighter than previously. Even with all my camera stuff, this 10 years ago, my pack, what I carry now, would have been 75, 80 pounds. Now, at the most, I'll get it to 45 or 50, and I can get it below that too, depending if I leave a couple things behind. And so weight has definitely been a huge shift. And then comfort too, honestly, backpacks, they just weren't comfortable before. And, my shoulders hurt always after those things. And, now they've designed them. I mean, I don't know all the engineering behind it, but I do know I feel a lot better. My back carries a lot of the weight as opposed to my shoulders. And maybe I've just learned to pack better too over the years, right? You don't shove every possible thing inside the top of your pack. That usually helps, but and keep the heavy stuff toward the bottom. But nonetheless, comfort level and weight have been the biggest things that I think have changed. It's been an evolutionary process, but certainly from 2010 to where we are now, it's a huge jump.
Right. Right. And through hikers always talk about their base weight. And, we know base weight means, what the pack weighs without food and water.
Yeah.
I think when you're a photographer, there's an additional component, right? I mean, there's base
Big
weight
time.
and then there's base weight plus camera weight. And then there's base weight plus camera weight plus food and water. And so,
Yes.
I mean, if you're bringing, I don't know how many pounds of camera equipment with you, you certainly are going to focus on that base weight and say, how can I get this lighter? What can I change and
yes,
leave out if I have to? So I'm not carrying a 70-pound pack, like you said.
yeah, and honestly, that you can do that to an extent, and that is, maybe you don't bring a tent. I still bring a sleeping bag. It's the Sierras, it gets cold. But and honestly, if you can bring another person who is like behind what you're doing, and thankfully I have a lot of great friends who honestly at the drop of a hat they'll go with me, and they don't mind shouldering some of that load, and because they know the end goal of all of this, and so they're cool with just being a part of these adventures and these stories that have developed over the years. And so that honestly, I know it's not like a like hard and fast solution, but taking another person back there and just sharing each other's kind of burdens in that way is really helpful. Yeah,
when I take my 22-year-old son out on hikes, I certainly share the burden, but I don't take any of his stuff. I give him lots and lots of my stuff.
22 years old, man. You don't need, you give it to him.
That's right. That's right. All right. Hey, before I forget, our outdoor gear, our must-bring gear review is sponsored by Outdoor Vitals, the ultralight backpacking gear company. I neglected to say that right off the bat, but I want to get that little plug in there. And then also, I spent a little time this afternoon messaging back and forth with a former and future guest by the name of Gabe Peterson, who is a trail runner. He and his buddy Kevin Goldman, I believe it's Goldman. Gabe and Kevin, they fast packed the JMT a couple of years ago, and they came on and told about that experience, but they've also had a number of adventures and experiences since then. So they're going to come on in a future episode, probably in August, and share their latest adventures. But in talking with Gabe this afternoon, he is going to be running the Badwater 100 on July 17th, which coincidentally is the same date that this episode will come out. So he's running the Badwater 100 on July 17th, and he has a fundraiser up to raise funds for that race, and also to find a cure for type 1 diabetes, which his daughter Sky suffers from. So I told him that I'd give him a little plug there for this fundraiser. Check out the John Freaking Muir pod Facebook page. I've got a link on there for that fundraiser. Even though the race is happening today, it's never too late to raise some more money for type 1 diabetes. So please check it out and help him out. There you go. Okay, let's back up a little bit, Josh, and talk about your origin story. This always intrigues me to find out how people got involved in the outdoors and hiking, and I want to hear about photography as well. Tell us a little bit about where you grew up and what your family was like, brothers, sisters, what kinds of sports and hobbies, and how did the outdoor adventure cult suck you in?
That's great, man. So I grew up, and I still live in a small town in Southern California called Yucaipa. And it's basically at the base of the San Bernardino Mountains. And then we also are home to Yucaipa Ridge Mountains. And so growing up, honestly, from my parents' backyard, literally, I would sketch pictures of the mountains when I was a little kid. I'd just sit out there and I'd draw on this paper, and just really hoping one day to go explore them. Honestly, I've mentioned this before to people, but just since being a kid, I didn't really know how to articulate it, but becoming an adult, I've sort of learned over the years that there was this mystery of the mountains to me, and I think there still is. It was like a tension of they were so beautiful, but at the same time, there was this danger element kind of lurking behind them all the time. And that tension between those two things really became a draw for me. Just growing up, it was this mystery that I just wanted to know more about. So you mentioned I'm gonna divert a little bit into other paths and then bring it back. So anyway, growing up, the only real sport I played was hockey. I played ice hockey, and I loved it. I don't play anymore, but I still enjoy the sport. And
Hang on, Josh. You grew up in Yucaipa, California, and you played ice hockey. That's not a common combination.
There were a few of us in town, and we were able to. We'd get together, we'd play, and where there wasn't ice, we'd get out on the rollerblades and go play at a tennis court, or whatever. And until we got kicked off, you know, back in the day where it was just, you know, hockey was just like, what is this?
Yeah,
but
both my parents are from the Midwest, and
okay,
when I was growing up, they would drag me to the Fabulous Forum to watch the Kings play.
yeah,
And back in those days, in the 70s, there were very few fans, and so they'd let you in. No matter where you bought your ticket, no matter what seat your ticket was in, they'd let you move down to the glass because they wanted to make sure that the TV picked up.
that's it.
It
Yeah,
looked like
well,
a packed stadium.
we did the same thing. The Pond in Anaheim, back when it was called the Pond, and you know, we would come in and we'd have our like cheap tickets, and then we could run down to the top. They never kicked us out. They just let us do it. It was great. Yeah.
Right. So I had that culture of hockey growing up. And then I said, you know what? I want to play hockey as an adult. And so I, you know, when I was like 20, 21, I joined an amateur adult hockey league for a few years until I broke my ankle 3 consecutive years. And, you know, that was it for me.
That's it, man.
Yeah.
That's an ankle breaking sport.
Yeah, it is.
But so I played the hockey through high school. And then once I got out of that, even before all that, I had studied music. So I was a classical guitarist, I still am, and learned how to play really young. And it had been my passion my whole life. Music was just, it always flowed out of me. And I still love to play and always have since being a kid. And so anyway, when I was in college, I got a scholarship for music to Cal Poly Pomona. And I was majoring in math at the time, and then one of my music professors just said, "You need to drop everything else and just focus on music." And so I said, "All right, fine." And I did eventually come to that decision. And so through that, I was a soloist, and I had a hard time on the stage. I would practice. I was a good player, but then when it came to the stage, I just suffered a ton of anxiety, and I couldn't quite just get across the plane that I knew I was capable of, and it was really bothersome. So I struggled for 2 years probably or so with that really bad. I would just shake up there, and I could tell some really funny stories, but I won't go into those yet. But eventually started studying some of the composers I was playing, and one had a big impact on me, as he does pretty much every musician in classical music, really any genre, but J.S. Bach. And you know, if you're a music student, all you do is study Bach for the most part, to a degree if you're in theory. And then if you're a guitar major or any kind of stringed instruments, you have to eventually encounter Bach. And the music was really moving to me. And I just felt like this whole connection with getting away from the technique of what I was doing and more into expressing the message behind the music. And that kind of set me free in a lot of ways artistically. So performing now became a vehicle of like expression for me, rather than, gosh, I just hope I play all the notes right. You know, it
Right.
was, that changed for me. And when that clicked, you know, that opened up a whole new world for me. And from there, basically, once I finished college, my wife and I got married, or my girlfriend and I got married. And, and then, and that's really when I started hitting the outdoors again. Because I had taken a break. I'd always kind of been in it when I was in town, but never photographed it. And then I went out to Yosemite before the wedding with a couple of buddies, and I just thought, wow, you know, I saw, it was very similar to when I encountered Bach playing through the fugues or the lute suites. It was this sort of seeing the raw, rugged landscape as a work of art to me. And it had that same sort of religious awakening like thing going on with me at the time too, where I felt that in music, and then I was seeing it in nature. And it was just something that I had to, it became like a must. Like I had to go pursue that. I had to figure out how to convey this message that helped me so much become a better artist in music. And figured that there was some purpose for me playing or purpose for me being here. And I felt like through landscape photography, that message could also be conveyed through just the art found in nature. Some sort of meaning and purpose kind of behind, us being here, and the intentionality behind all that. So I really latched onto that, and that honestly became the impetus for all the outdoor adventures after that.
Right.
Just wanting to experience that myself, and then wanting to share that with others.
Right.
So.
Now I've got a number of things to unpack here. There's a lot of ground we just covered, and there's a lot of comments. A lot of comments I want to make. No, it's all good. It's all good. First of all, I'm in awe of musicians because I have no musical talent. I can barely play the radio, so it's tough. So congratulations there. That's always so impressive to me. And you talk about when that switch flipped for you in music. Mm-hmm. with J.S. Bach. And then, so was Yosemite when the switch flipped for you?
I wouldn't say, Yosemite was sort of kind of pushed me to that next level, but I had been out to the Sierras before that. Mm-hmm. and I knew already how much I loved it. And my first adventure in the Sierras was Mount Whitney when I was in 7th grade. I didn't do the mountain, but we went up there and went up to like Lone Pine Lake. Mm-hmm. And I remember just being there going like, whoa, there's just this random lake out here with all this granite around it. And I just thought, this is awesome. And I was in awe of it. And again, being young and not really understanding how to articulate some of those feelings that, as I matured as an artist, sort of understanding some of those, what those were later in life, it had a big impact on me pretty early in life. But Yosemite, after that, was really where I just connected all the dots, I guess.
Right. Right. Now, I had a former guest on here by the name of Jay Wilson, who wrote a book called Elevation Gain. And in our discussion, he struck upon a phrase that really, I think, explains it very clearly for me and for our listeners out there. Whenever I've come back from my hikes, I've got my iPhone out there and I'll take pictures and I'll bring them back and I will show my friends and family, hey, look at this place. Look at this place. And they're like, oh yeah, that's nice. That's nice. I'm like, no, it's not nice. It's spectacular. It's unbelievably spectacular. It's so spectacular. It moves you inside. That's how spectacular it is. Yeah. And they look back at the picture and they say, yeah, that's nice. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Yeah. And so Jay Wilson, he put it perfectly. He talked about the frustration of 1,000-word pictures for million-word places. Yeah, absolutely. That is a huge frustration. And I think that's why that in general is like, how, from a technique perspective, how do I bring that million-word picture to somebody? Right. It's never going to be like being there. It won't be. But you learn as a photographer. I mean, I won't go too far down this, but when people talk about, we can do this section to this section in this amount of time, it'll be this amount of miles, if you're on the JMT or whatever, or you're doing a summit or whatever, as a photographer, you have to stop and say, actually, no, I want to be here because the lighting is going to be at its best at this time of the day. And so we're going to have to stop a little short, or we're going to have to go a little longer. And you have to make those calls as a photographer, knowing that, we're not going to be able to do as much ground as you were hoping because I really want to photograph this spot. Well, we're going to pass it. You can photograph it. No, that's the 1,000-word picture. Right. So you have to be intentional about those times. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes. And so how are you paying the bills these days? Are you doing it through classical music, or are you doing it through photography or something else? No. So classical music, I think I made a collective of like $1,000 over the lifetime of being a musician. That's about 10 times as much as I made doing a podcast. So I play all the time still, but I mainly volunteer these days. Honestly, I love it though. I have 3 kids and I think it's great for them to see. It's fun for me to do that for them in ways. So paying the bills. Yeah. So I do have a full-time gig. I'm been a number of different things, mainly a designer, graphic designer and web developer. I've done both. So
I was an art director for a magazine called Garden Design for a number of years, and was a photographer for them as well. And so that was an awesome gig, just going to places, photographing gardens. It wasn't these huge outdoor adventures, but it was still honing my skills. And then being able to put that all together in a story, much like the book did, but doing that on a magazine level, a quarterly magazine for 5 to 6 years was a lot of fun for me. And now I work for a tech company in Orange County called SecureAuth. And they do like identity security when you like log into things, make sure that you are who you say you are. Mm-hmm. And so technology is great. It's awesome. And so I kind of lead the design there and then do all the web development for them as well right now. And like many in my position, we freelance. So I do a lot of freelance work where I design things for other people, just projects that I enjoy doing. And so I pay the bills with that. Yeah.
Got it. Got it. Pay the bills and pay for your adventures that way.
Yeah, that's it.
And before we leave classical guitar in the rear view here, are you gonna serenade us with any songs tonight? Any riffs from maybe some classic rock songs? Or
I would totally do it. I busted a nail. You can see it right there. And there's like my normal length there. I'm a little timid, but I don't know. Let's. I don't have one next to me at the moment, but
okay, maybe in the second.
We'll feel it out. We'll feel it out later.
Maybe in the second segment then.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
All right. Very good. And and I've got here, as a 1,000-word photographer, I've got something here in the notes that says photography, your philosophy behind it, and its impact on you. I don't even know if that's a valid question to a 1,000,000-word photographer. What can you tell us about just how you approach photography and how you approach this magnificent book that you put together?
Well, thank you for that. And honestly, it's gonna. We've touched on it already a little bit, but at the end of the day, it really goes back to that. That's a spiritual thing for me, and at its root, at its core, it was. I felt like when I photograph a piece of raw landscape, and I frame that moment. For me, there's a whole bunch of emotions involved because I feel like it's a reminder to me, and not everybody will feel this way. So I understand that. And I don't say this to make waves or anything like that, but this is just me personally. I see it as art. And so I see intention through that. And, we can always debate on how it got to what state it was, but at the end of the day, I still think it's beautiful. It's hard for me to look at the Milky Way and say like, oh man, it just doesn't do it for me. I don't think that way. It's really inspiring to me. And it just puts me in this mindset of a higher power, of a God of some kind. And so I say like an artist of time and space. And so it really kind of, like I said, it was a spiritual awakening for me, both in music and in landscape photography of just believing in God. And so and through that, I found a lot of purpose behind what I was doing and meaning behind what I was doing. So it was a hope for me when I photographed landscape, and it's my hope that I can just encourage somebody with that like, wow, that's awesome. Maybe I am here for some reason, and that I just didn't realize, and maybe I do have some untapped potential that I just haven't really taken the opportunity to try yet. And so, I don't know if that makes much sense, but to try to put it into words, I think that's the best I could do. Yeah.
Fantastic. When you were growing up, did you have a lot of religion in your life? I mean, did you go to church every weekend? So this was truly a spiritual awakening.
Yeah, it really was.
Out in nature.
Yeah. It wasn't, and I'm still this way. Unfortunately, we see it all the time where, people will start mixing politics and all this stuff in there. It was never anything regarding that. It was just, the stuff I saw. I couldn't help but like be moved to that level. It was nothing like trying to make some statement or anything like that. It was just the way it just happened. Yeah. And so, yeah, but no, didn't grow up with really any of that stuff and then in college, it wasn't until I really started maturing as a performer where that became a real thing. And I was able to kind of set my ego off to the side a little bit, and not, like want to, I don't even know, not get so mad at myself after like a bad performance or something like that, and just continue to move through those failures. So, and then same thing out here, it's like I blew it on stage so many times that by the time, when I got to a level of like excellence to some degree, it was it was a real thing, and I owe it all to that spiritual awakening for sure.
Yeah, one of the themes.
Yeah,
go ahead.
It just took the attention off of me. It did. It really. I think it deflected all that, and I feel the same way about nature. And I don't mean to. I think it's fine what people are doing. Oh, we did this, we did that. I did this summit, I did that summit. But it's so me focused that I think oftentimes we're missing some of that bigger picture of like, that's great. There's nothing wrong with that, but I feel like there's a culture developing where we're not maybe respecting the environment and the land for what it is. Almost like I would refer to it as a sacred space in a lot of ways. The areas of the JMT and pretty much any natural landscape, in moments, it certainly has a sacred feeling to it. And so I think that culture has sort of developed through social media and selfies. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. Like I do them sometimes, but like I do feel like we just got to take time to recognize what's around us a little bit more too, and respect that. Yeah. If that makes any sense, but yeah.
Absolutely it does. And we've had guests talk about the unfortunate mile pounders out there who they're all about the miles. They got to make their campsite. They got to make their mileage, and their heads are down looking at the trail, and they're making their miles, and they'll get to their campsite when they said they're going to get to their campsite. But they've given up the opportunity to look around and enjoy exactly what you're talking about.
It's letting nature impact you, right? More than you impacting you. It's letting your surroundings sort of just say like, hey, we have something to tell you. Listen up a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what you have described with that spiritual awakening is another example that comes up again and again as a recurring theme on the podcast, and that is the transformational nature of nature. I mean, being out on the trail, being out in the environment like that, people come back different for the better.
Yeah, I call it objective beauty. I think I do have a chapter in the book called that, and that's kind of the thesis of that whole thing of like. In philosophy, you often will argue about like, is there such thing as, objective morals or right and wrong? And I'm not going to go down that path, but like the idea of can beauty be objective? And that's when I bring up the Milky Way example or waterfall, and I think it can to some degree. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Hey, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to get into some of your hikes, and I'm particularly interested to hear from a photographer on how your outdoor adventures and your planning and the logistics and what time you're getting up to do stuff varies from my experience out there. I got a sense of it when I was going through your book, and I want you to share that with our listeners. So stay tuned for that. We'll be right back. And welcome back. We're talking to Josh Endres about his experience out in the Sierras over the last 10, 12 years. And we're going to get to his book in a little bit here, but one of the early chapters in the book details your first experience out there on a backpacking trip. And I found it particularly amusing / horrifying. I was sweating for you when I was reading this. So would you like to share that experience with us?
Yeah, PTSD, man. No, yeah, that was, it set the stage. So, we mentioned earlier, I had done, some day hiking and stuff in my local mountains, but never really any backpacking. I was so close to home, it never really was required. So, but a little backstory to all this, there was a guy who, once I started sort of attending a church of some kind, he was a principal of a school there, and he was a Sierra mountain guide as well. He had been. He retired from that and became an educator. And so anyway, I got word of this, and I thought, I got to talk to this guy. And so I was like, look, you got fundraisers. I'll play guitar for you at those and all that. And can you teach me how to be a mountaineer? Yeah, for sure. And he didn't require me to do any of that stuff. I did, but he was a nice guy, and he just kind of took me under his wing. And I started, well, I want to do the John Muir Trail. I hear that's awesome. I want to do it. And so he's like, okay. And he kind of told me, here your food drops. Here's kind of how you do that and plan for this kind of stuff. The stuff you go through when you do a long hike like that. And so, anyway, besides all that information, he finally asked, well, do you want me to go with you? And so I was like, yeah. Like, I didn't even think that was a possibility. So he's like, all right, yeah, I'll start some. I can't do the whole thing, but I'll start with you, and we'll go from there. I was like, great, this is awesome. So it was 2011, huge snow year in the Sierra. So it's like late July, and we're starting in Yosemite, and you quickly run into Donahue Pass. And I remember looking at that going, we're going up that? Like, I'm not going up that. Like, it's so steep. Like, it's full of ice. Like, it was nothing but snow. And we had encountered patches here and there, but that's your first real high elevation on the trail. And
did you come in from Tuolumne?
Yeah, from Tuolumne that time. Yeah.
Yeah.
We couldn't get a permit for Happy Isles at that point. So we started in Tuolumne or Lyle Canyon. And I did Cathedral Peak or Cathedral Lake the night before because I wanted a picture of it. And so we did that and then came back out and then started Lyle Canyon. And so anyway, so we headed up Donahue, and he's just like, all right, kicking steps and all this. And I'm like, okay, kicking steps. My toes are like numb because they hurt so bad. And finally it was like, okay, Jim, get in front of me. And the mountain guide was Jim. And I was like, I'll just follow your tracks. And so that worked better for me. And so anyway, we get through to Red's Meadow. He had twisted his ankle on one of hopping over a stream at one point. So he opted out for these next 2 days. So he said, well, instead of going all the way to Mosquito Flats for this next section, why don't you guys cross country this and I'll come pick you up in Mammoth. And he's like, this might be a more fun thing to do. And I'm like, well, all right. At the time it was like, I gotta do the trail. And so I was like, but we ended up doing this cross country diversion and across, we left south of Red's Meadow up to Deer Lakes. And it was, that was a long day, and we were lost a number of times. He wasn't with us. He opted out on that. And there were a couple other guys that came with me that were fairly experienced still though. Anyway, we found our way. Eventually those guys leave. And then we had to skip a portion of that trail that first year because of the just the way things worked. People get hurt, and so we had to exit a little early. And then so I skipped a portion at that point. I made it all up later, but so the I met my brother and his friend who were just like me. Let's just go do this, man. This will be awesome. And so we started at North Lake out of Bishop, and we start going back. We have a bunch of stream crossings that year, obviously because of the heavy snowpack. And I had been used to those at that point, and so trudge on through those. We came across one really sketchy one. It was not one marked on the map, just this waterfall basically on one side, and then the other side going into Paiute Creek, which is, I don't know why they call it a creek. It's a river, and just raging down there. And it's like, dude, what? And it's like nothing but white water we have to cross. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And my brother was like, let me give it a shot, and so we're all like creating a hold. And he's like, it's not that bad. It's like, oh, great. And so he makes it across all right. And, we throw our packs across at that point. We all get one. But so I'm kind of building it up here. But so anyway, that's all good. We continue on to McClure Meadow, and it had been 8 or 9 days for me at that point. And I hadn't showered. Even when I went out, I didn't shower. I don't know why I didn't do that. And I smelled so bad. I remember we left our tents out, and we hadn't had thunderstorms at all up until this day. And it was like, what the heck is this? And it rains out here. And This is how new we were to it. And so it starts pouring on us, and we're like set up at camp. So all my stuff is drenched because I didn't put a rain fly on. I didn't even bring one. I didn't bring one. And so they're like, well, sorry, man. And I'm like, can I get in the tent with you guys? They're like, sure. And I come in. I smelled terrible. And so they kicked me out. And they couldn't handle it. And anyway, I remember just feeling so down on myself. Oh, and when we got out, I lost my wedding band in Bishop, too. And so we ended up finding it. A campground host actually found it. I have no idea how. But so I was just like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? Like, I'm stuck out here now at this point. Like, I was not taking in any of the beauty I had hoped. It was just like miles and miles, like head down, like, are we going to live every day? Like, I had those questions. And so
you were in survival mode at that point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
And so then we hit Muir Pass, and that's when it all came to a climax. It was obviously covered in snow as everything else was. Lakes were frozen. And snow bridges were everywhere. And so, you walk over the snow bridge, you hear this water running under you, and you're like, oh my gosh, like if I fall in this, what's going to happen? And and there's no one out there. And we're following like previous tracks on the snow that thankfully hadn't melted out yet from the day's heat. And then this thunderstorm happens right as we approach the pass. And we're like, oh, one of these again. I just knew, like Jim, the mountain guy, said, Josh, just make sure you're never on top of a pass during a thunderstorm. Happened to hit when I was on top of the pass. And so hail is coming down. It hurt when it hit you. And I had never been that stressed. And this is the only time this has ever happened to me. And this is no joke. Like, I was sweating blood. I thought I was going to die. I thought we were dead. I thought lightning's coming. We're the highest thing around. We're done. And they have a shelter up there. Muir Hut. And so, I was like, well, let's get in there. And I don't know if I don't know if it's lightning proof. I don't believe it is, but I'm not sure. I don't remember there being any kind of lightning rod on it. So at any rate, I went in and felt like we were safe. So the placebo effect kind of took over, I think. And there was a couple in there, husband and wife, and Pete and Mary were their names. And it was like sweet relief, seriously, to see them. Oh, and on the way up the pass, like we had been really good about filtering our water the entire time. Like we were just scared to death of like getting Giardia or something like that. And so like I'm getting out, I had a steri pen. Do you remember those things?
Yes.
So it takes like a minute to hold it there. And so I'm sitting here filling up my bottle. I got the steri pen in there, and the guys would have to wait for me. And I just see them. It's just gushing water just straight from the stream down there. And it was clean. We were fine. But it was just a funny sight to see like how stressed everybody was that we just didn't care anymore. It's like, just get us out of here. And so anyway, we arrive at the hut. Pete and Mary were there, and we're like, are we going to be okay? And they're like, yeah, you'll be fine. Let's just stay here. And I don't know if they felt that way, but they certainly calmed us down. And so we ended up talking.
Thank goodness for Pete and Mary.
Yeah, just having another person there who felt like he knew what he was doing for sure. But like, like just knowing that like, oh my gosh, I'm not the lead anymore. Like I'm not going to get us killed. So was a really nice feeling. And now on that same token though, we decided it's against the rules. So another guy showed up, his name was Brian. So we all just started sitting around talking. We weren't going anywhere for the rest of the day. We were like, we're done. And it was a stressful day. We were all freaked out for a little bit. And then the storm passed. And that's when I kind of really got that first shot for me in the Sierras of like, oh, this is what it means to be a landscape photographer. When I waited it out till sunset after a storm, you see all these amazing clouds and colors on top of this snowy pass was really quite incredible for me. And that's when I realized, okay, being a photographer means that I got to start dealing with these conditions a little bit more. It's not just going out when the weather's nice. It's kind of like pushing that envelope of, okay, when do I go? Do I stay? Do I go a little higher? And you always, that's been a game for my whole career in photography. But, it's such a beautiful night and sunset. And the next day we went down through LeConte Canyon, and we met a ranger there. His name was Rick, and really nice guy. Him and his wife were there, and they were talking to us, and he was like, "Can you guys give me a report on everything up there?" And we're like, "Yeah, sure." It was scary. And
that was the report. It was scary.
Yeah. There were snow bridges, and we thought we were going to die a bunch of times. He starts kind of laughing at us, and he's like, "Would you guys bring rain gear?" And we're like, "We brought trash bags." And he goes, I remember his exact, "What do you think, honey? You want to go follow him up over, we're going to go on a Bishop Pass or something. You want to follow him up over Bishop Pass with a couple of trash bags?" We had another thunderstorm brewing that day too. And so anyway, but he had, "Oh, where'd you guys sleep last night?" And Brian just starts going, "Oh yeah, we slept in." And then he like paused real quick, because you're not supposed to sleep in the hut. Rick finishes his sentence, "Your hut." And we were like, he started laughing at us. And so that was a lot of fun, but we eventually made it out. I didn't do the entire JMT that year. And so we ended up just leaving at Bishop Pass, which is what I planned to do. I wasn't going to, I couldn't through hike it just based on job requirements and all that. So we ended up leaving early, or leaving at Bishop Pass. Brian was supposed to do the whole thing, and he's like, "Can I just go out with you guys?" So we took him out and took him to his car at Whitney Portal. But yeah, that was that was an incredible story, because I thought to myself, I will never do this again. I was in over my head, and yet I kept coming back. And so, yeah, that's kind of the first story there of real backpacking for me.
Yes, I like that statement. "I'll never do this again," because I've heard that from many people. You know, they go out and they have this terrible experience, yet there is something about the outdoors that just keeps bringing you back.
It draws you back.
It
Yeah,
does.
it was. And like I said, you know, that as someone who has valued art and trying to be an artist much of their life, you know, really capturing that sunset and taking in all the colors of that night, that had an impact on me. And I thought, I knew what to kind of look for at that point. And I wanted to go back and see what was possible after that too. So yeah, kind of inspiration in some ways.
So you start out on this trip, and you are not in command. You have an experienced guide with you.
Yeah.
And then shortly into the trip, the guide says, "I got bad ankle. I got to check out. You just, go ahead. You'll be all right." And now you wander into one of the worst storms that you've experienced out there, and you're on top of a mountain with metal sticks in your hands, and
a tripod.
Yes. Very good. That's a great first experience out there.
It was a good introduction to the harsh realities of the Sierra Nevada.
Yeah. And I will go back to a couple of comments that you made that kind of demonstrate the pressure there is on new hikers, especially if you're going to do something like a trail. If you're going to do the John Muir Trail, there's a pressure to stay on that trail and get every foot, have your foot on every part of that trail, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so you talked about skipping one part, but you came back and you made it up later.
I did. Those first 4 years back there was all about, like, okay, I just got to make sure I do it all. And I ended up doing sections, multiple times too, because I just thought they were beautiful sections. And So over the years, that was important in the beginning to me. Mm-hmm. But after that, maybe it's because I did it. And then so after that, I became more, I want to explore territory that hasn't been explored much at all, or even photographed at all. And that became a big impetus of the project for me. Yeah.
Right. And so I think a lot of your subsequent trips were not necessarily, supposed to be through trips or of an entire trail, but you're picking out areas that you want to photograph, and you're planning the trip around the timing and the logistics of what the photography is going to take.
Yeah. And you mentioned that, of like what planning a trip as a photographer, and that is it. Doing a lot of miles is one thing, but you have to balance that with, like, you can accomplish, maybe you do the entire JMT in 3 weeks or something like that. But, did you get what you set out to get? And as a photographer, you're going to miss a lot of stuff that way. You will. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just the reality of it. And you'll get a lot of good things out of it, but you will miss some things out of it as well. And so, it had to be, it was fine tuning that, pushing that envelope as far as I could with the maximum miles, with the maximum time spent at the right spots. Yeah.
Got it. Let's talk about your book for a little bit. Maybe we can use it to help structure some of your other memorable trips in the Sierras. And I'm holding it up, but I've got this virtual background, so it's not going to come through. But I want everybody to know that when Josh told me he was an author and would I'd like a copy of his book, and I said, yeah, that'd be great. I was expecting some trail memoir, maybe a paperback. And 3 days later, I get this package on the porch, and I about hurt my back lifting it up. And I open it up. It is this beautiful.
Yeah, here it is, right here. But yeah,
there you go. That's it. That's it. Thank you. It's a beautiful. I'm looking for the page count here. 350 page, basically a coffee table book.
Yeah, it's a coffee table book.
Just incredible pictures of the Sierras, accompanied with some text about some of the stories that you have from memorable trips there.
Mm-hmm.
But I started leafing through it right when I got it, and I said, this is close to million-word pictures, because it really stirred something in me and got that longing going to get out there again because of what I saw in this book. And I love the title of the book, Josh.
Oh yeah.
The title is It Was Good. It Was Good. 10 years in the High Sierra. And tell me about the title. Why did you go with It Was Good? It almost sounds like you're past your prime and you're saying, yeah, it was good, but you got a lot of hiking left in you, a lot of photography left in you. Why the title It Was Good?
Well, part of it was when you come back from a trip, it was always, hey, how was it, man? It was good. And that was always the first thing I say, and I think anybody says for the most part, even though it may have been a terrible trip. Oh yeah, it was good. And then you go into what really happened. And that for me, so that kind of started it. And then tying it in with the spiritual aspect of that, tying it back to sort of Genesis of the, when God created, it was good. And that sort of going back to that objective beauty of like, if nature was really made, if nature is good for us, it's good for the soul. And I think, it's more than just a pretty picture. It is transformative stuff out there. It's hard for people to put into words, but I think if you're inclined to believe that way, as I am, there's a purpose behind the beauty of it all, and that goes into you when you're out there, whether it's just inspiration, motivation for other things outside of the mountains. It spills over into a lot of life. And so good became the word good, I thought was a really, it defined nature well. And so it was a combination of sort of those two things of like, yeah, that's the first thing I said when someone asked me throughout a trip. Yeah, it was good. And then tying it back to the spiritual aspect, and if our creator created this to be good, then we ought to enjoy it and preserve it and take care of it as best we can. So, yeah.
I love that connection. That's fantastic.
Thanks.
That is wonderful. Now, in the book, I know we're going to talk about a few other trips here. Are the trips we're going to talk about, are they included in some of the stories in the book?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Let's go ahead. Pick one for me. What are we going to talk about?
All right, let's see here. I would say we talked about the first one. I think, hitting on a few different things here. Let me, I put some notes up here where I was going to talk about. Sorry. So, okay. I think probably the most memorable shot for me, I'll start with this one, was, many who have traveled the Sierras, you get to know sort of the sub-ranges of the mountain range. And one of the big ranges there that had an impact on me as far as developing me as a mountaineer, developing me as a photographer, was the Palisades. It really, today everything is, I think, explored a lot more. But back then, it really it hadn't been photographed hardly at all. And I just thought, you know, it was home to California's largest glacier. It had, you know, the traverse behind the glacier was like 14,000 foot peaks. And it was just this awesome, almost like just backbone like of the Sierra. And so I wanted to really understand that area more. And so one of the books that I'll probably recommend later would be as a guidebook, R.J. Sikor's The High Sierra, and where he talks about pretty much every route possible on these mountains. And he mentions the views from them, like, oh, you know, this is probably the best view of the Sierra. And one of those mountains was Mount Agassiz. And I thought, okay, I could do that mountain. It was class 3 on its easiest route from the east side, class 2 from the west side. And so I thought, I'll take the east side and make it a little bit more spicy and cross the glacier in it and see what happens. So anyway, get this, it's October, late October, and we're out there. And I talk a friend into doing this with me, as I'm a better salesman than I ever give myself credit for, talking people into some of these things. But so we base camp at like Lake 2 along the North Fork of Big Pine. And it's 3 a.m. and we are going for the summit of Agassiz that morning. And I had never been up there. It's all route finding eventually after Sam Mac Meadow. And so we hit Sam Mac Meadow. It's like 4 a.m.-ish, and it's freezing. It's snowing on us. And we climb this sort of waterfall that's coming into the meadow from drainage of Sam Mac Lake, which is above it. And so but it's all ice. And somehow we make it up. And I don't even know, like we can't see behind us. It's dark. And I didn't even want to think about going down that thing again. But so we make it up and we are looking at this map and still pitch black outside. And I'm like, I have no idea where we are, man. Like the mountain's over here. I think we're here. And he's like, no, we're at the base of Agassiz Glacier right now. And I'm like, I don't think we are. And let's just climb this mountain. And I'm like, seriously? So, all right, let's climb this mountain. So we just start going up this mountain, which was, I would say class 3, but with all the ice and snow, you know, it's class 5, honestly, because you were slipping and sliding on steep glacial moraine all over the place. And so this may go into too much detail here. Yeah, I'll leave that up to you. But we can. I
know what you're going to talk about.
I know what you're going to talk about.
I just read this again today. This is a great story. Go ahead. This is good.
I know what you're going to talk about. So I hit the. We're going up, and I'm just like, oh gosh, you know, elevation starts hitting me, and anyone who I don't know, maybe it's just me, but like, if I'm not acclimated well, which I was not here, I just went basically right up, and you know, we're nearly at 14,000 feet, and I'm just like, oh gosh, you know, I don't puke. Some people puke. Mine come.
That's my favorite. It's my favorite line from the book, Josh.
Yeah.
It's
all right.
I'm not a puker. I'm a pooper. That was great.
And that's the line. And so anyway, hey man, I gotta stop.
Was that broken out in a big pull quote on the page somewhere?
I don't know if that was a pull quote.
I don't think it was, but it definitely jumped off the page at me. I'm not a puker.
It's easier to write it and not know when people read stuff like that than it is to say to somebody face to face. But
honestly, that might be the opening quote of this episode. I might start off with, "I'm not a puker, I'm a pooper." Josh Endres.
That's it. I give you permission.
Okay, good.
But at any rate, I am hopeless, man. As far as I'm concerned, this is bringing back memories of the trip I talked about previously. A lot of snow, bad weather. I am not feeling well, and we're lost. And we weren't lost before, but we were lost this time. There was no trail or anything like that to follow. And shining, honestly, I put this in the book too, but shining your headlamp into like falling snow, it's like putting your brights on in the fog. Like, it doesn't help anything. Well, I think maybe you're like, I can't see anything over there. And, and so anyway, if somehow the storm broke, and I remember the the sun came through these clouds, and I got one of the most memorable shots I will ever get of that range from that morning. Of this just sort of it wasn't Sam Mac Lake we were above. It was an unnamed, more of a tarn that we were above, and it's shooting back at Cloud Ripper Summit back there, backlit, and through the cloud. I just thought this moment will never ever be done again, because no one's that stupid to come out this time, and for one, and then they'll probably take the right route too if they do. And so it was. We didn't get the shot from the summit that morning, but we got something really awesome that was like so encouraging. And so anyway, that breathed some life into me, and we ended up going and trying to top out still, but the weather just got bad again. It started snowing on us again, so we dropped back. And but I'll segue into another story along these same lines. You know, I've talked about failure, sort of. Don't let failure stop you, let it motivate you. And so, yeah, I didn't get the shot, but that doesn't mean I'm going to stop there. So the next year, I decided not to go when it was snowing. I went in the summer and thought, okay, let me make this a little bit easier on myself. So we had base camped. My buddy needed to finish a section of the JMT. And he was like, well, can I just finish this section? And I was like, yeah, I'll do it with you. But then can we do this mountain afterwards?
Was this the same buddy from the previous trip?
No.
He said he's never going again with you.
Yeah. They never, they did like 1 year. My brother, somebody asked my brother recently, side story real quick. They're like, a friend of mine, his sons want to do the JMT. And he was like, Josh, you know, what do I don't want to do it. What do I do? And then I was like, no, it's fun, man. You'll enjoy it. And then I was like, yeah, that's my brother. He went on a couple of ones with me. And Tyler was like, started talking about things. And finally he said, yeah, you know, I don't remember ever having fun on those trips, actually. Because it's not until after you're done where you start laughing at everything.
That's the definition. I've learned this in the last month or so. That's the definition of type 2 fun.
That is, yeah. Is that what it is?
Yeah, type 1 fun is you're having fun while you're doing it, but you don't really talk about it much afterwards. Type 2 fun is you're not having fun while you're doing it, but you talk a lot about it afterwards.
Yes, you do. So type 2 fun. Yes.
Type 2 fun.
That's it. But back to the Agassiz story. So we finished a section of the JMT, which was the same section though, except we cross-countryed over Darwin Canyon and Lamarck Call, and then down to Evolution Lake that time. So that was kind of fun, different, a little bit different. And we did the JMT, and then left at Bishop Pass and base camp this time at Agassiz. And so I mapped out my route that evening. And then again, we started at midnight. It's okay, we're gonna climb this mountain at midnight. And I do this, you mentioned the timing of things. You have to do this if you're a photographer, because you don't just want a middle of the day shot, because you're not going to capture, you're going to get 1,000-word picture, as you said earlier. You want that 1,000,000-word picture. And so you want to capture these special moments under the right light. And so oftentimes that means you have to do stuff in the dark. As uncomfortable as it is, you got to do it sometimes. And so we're looking at the west face, and it seemed pretty basic. It was class 2 and maybe 3 at some points. But at any rate, we head up at midnight. My buddy forgets his headlamp, and but it was a full moon. So it actually, with all the granite back there, if you've been back in the Sierra under a full moon, it's kind of like daytime sometimes. So we could see okay, and we head up. And you know, it's funny, when I get a shot, when I'm close to something that I know I'm gonna love, like that I've been after for a while, adrenaline kicks in. And I don't even think about how tired I am. And I am moving, I'm moving so fast up this mountain. And I finally get to the top. I'm like, whoa, you know, and like I'm looking over at the east side of the ridge, the glacier's there. And I got chills. I remember this like, oh my gosh, because it drops off too on that east side. And the wind was so bad though. And I remember just hopping into this like cleft in the rock somewhere. Like I was just sheltering myself so I wouldn't die of like hypothermia. It was so cold with the wind coming through. So it was like 4 a.m. or so by the time we topped out on the summit. And maybe earlier, but at any rate, so I just started, okay, well, let me take some photos to kind of see what a composition would look like. Cause you can't make out everything in the dark. And so the moon was setting. And I remember just taking some shots. Okay, this is cool. This will work. And then sunrise came, I shot that. And, I was shaking so bad. You know, when you shake, you touch your face. Have you ever been that way? And you feel like someone else is touching you?
Yes.
Where you're just like, you're so lifeless, you know? And it's like, oh man, this is weird. But I kept doing it because it was kind of freaking me out. So, and then the blood starts coming back in and it hurts really bad. But at any rate, that shot, I was after that shot. I had it shot in my mind for like 3 years, and to finally get it was pretty awesome. And it wasn't until later I realized, oh, I got these whole things under the moonlight, and those shots were actually in focus. And so that shot and the previous one I mentioned about when we were in the snowstorm, I got, I was a shortlisted finalist for the 2016 Landscape Photographer of the Year for the United States. Yeah.
Wow.
And it was just, no one was ever photographing this stuff. And so honestly, like the impetus for all these adventures was becoming photography. And the stories behind them were just like, that was why I kind of kept coming back, because I knew they'd be fun and we'd have all these memories. But it was honestly the notion of just like, I had a shot in my mind that I never saw done before, and I wanted to go after it. And, I pretty much kind of did whatever it took to get it. And so that was a shot that, that was a sort of a transformative shot for me, was getting that. And that's in the book. I'm sure you've, 2016 is when it was. So
yes.
Yeah. Yes. And then
I thought you were gonna tell me. I thought this sounds familiar to me from reading the book. You were gonna tell me that you got up to the top, and you were so focused on getting up there so quickly, you turn around and your buddy wasn't there.
That was a different one.
Was that a different story?
Yes, that was
the two of you arrived at the top via different routes.
Midnight ascents were not an uncommon thing for us. So that one was up Mount Russell, which I'll share too. I don't know if you're familiar with Russell, but it is it's got a gnarly east ridge on it. So all the routes up Mount Russell are difficult and exposed. So, well, I mean, the east ridge, I wouldn't say it's difficult, but it's really exposed. So Mount Russell is Mount Whitney's sort of neighboring 14er. And we started at like 3 a.m. We base camped at Upper Boy Scout Lake on the Mountaineers route of Whitney. And I had done the Mountaineers route a few times in winter actually as well. And then I kept coming back because I wanted this Russell shot. And I thought, if I could get a shot of Whitney from Russell, Whitney was such it's an iconic mountain, obviously. But I never really saw it shot from Russell. And I thought, I could do this. And, and that's when the wheels start going. And then I talked somebody into it. It was always the same guy too. And I don't know why he kept agreeing to go. It was a guy, I quoted him in the book. He was like, Josh, I just want to enjoy camping again.
Yes, that's right.
But anyway, so we head up at 3:30, and the guy, we had another guy with us, Doug, and this was his first trip with me. He was pretty seasoned mountaineer as well. And he's like, I said, well, okay, so we'll leave at like 3 a.m. to get up Russell. He looks at Ben and he goes, is he serious? It's like, yeah. He's like, what? Why? And I'm like, dude, we got to get good lighting on it. And he's like, all right, I'm not joining you. I'll be up there. I'll leave at 5. And he caught up to us. He was really fast. But and part of that was I was just shooting for an hour or so. And but at any rate, my crampon. I hadn't used crampons really prior to that because I'd always found ways around glaciers or ice patches, or I just went up them and just prayed a lot. But
well, it's a spiritual experience. So
yes.
I mean, got that going for you.
That's it. That's all part of it. But and so we're going up, and I had the lead at first. It was kind of that adrenaline. I'm going to get this shot. I can't believe it. And then Ben catches up to me and he's like, "Hey man, the crampon is like, I've been carrying this for like 5 minutes." And I'm like, "Oh, geez, sorry." I latch that back on. And then, you start getting tired, you take breaks, and then you sort of play leapfrog with one another. And then eventually I could see light changing. So I detoured before we were on the true route of the East Ridge. I just detoured to go because light was changing. I thought, I gotta go. And I'm not the brightest sometimes. And I brought a thing called a star tracker with me, which was like 7 pounds extra, where it would track stars. So you could shoot these long exposures, but get no star trails on your camera. And I thought, I got to try this. I'm going to bring it up there. And, so I hold a 50-pound pack up the Mountaineers route, essentially. And because of all this extra photography equipment. And so I haul that up Russell too. And I'm dead tired. And then I can't get the dumb thing off my tripod. So I can't even use my tripod at this point. I'm just carrying it as dead weight, essentially. So I'm just trying to set up on rocks, getting this shot. Okay, is my camera still enough? What does it look like? And building up rocks under it to get the lens pointed up a certain way. And so I'm just building these little Karen's kind of thing where I could set up the camera and it would be still. Anyway, it worked out. But it was a pretty stressful moment there when I realized, oh, my tripod, I need Allen wrenches to get this whole thing off, and I can't do it. So anyway, yeah, and so I got the shot, and but I didn't know where Ben was. He just kept moving, and so I'm like, great. And if Russell is really exposed. I mentioned that earlier, but it's East Ridge is essentially a knife edge, class 3 of climbing, and so you arrive at it, and honestly, no matter which way you go, it's a steep drop off, and it's a little, it's scary if you're not ready for that. And so at any rate, I'm yelling where I am, Ben, where are you? And apparently he was yelling my name too, but we couldn't hear each other. And finally I see him, he's got a ledge above me, and he's doing this number. And I was like, "Oh, there you are." And so we caught up to each other again, and ended up going on the East Ridge. We actually didn't make the summit. There's 2 summits. So I think we made the East. I didn't think we did initially, but looking back, I believe we did. And I crawl over one part of the East Ridge. We're in the middle of it, and I'm like, "All right, man, how you feeling? You want to keep going?" And he gets up and, "No way!" And and so I was like, all right, it's all good. I got the shot I was looking for. And on the other side of that was Lake Teleño, which is, I believe it's the United States, it's the highest named lake in the United States. So it was a cool looking lake. It was huge. And so I took some time photographing that. I kept trying to talk one of the guys into dropping down the ridge so I could photograph him next to the lake to give it scale, but they wouldn't do it. And but yeah, so that was Russell, and but all these, the Ghazi's trip, the Russell trip, they prep you, each time you kind of grow a little bit as a mountaineer too, right? Like the exposure you receive on Russell is pretty jarring, and for me it was too, and it was like, okay, and you have a new level of expectations in the mountains now. All of a sudden, you're like, well, you know what? I got through enough of that where I feel like I could do it. And so you start doing other mountains that are like, okay, it's exposed for this amount, but I think I can handle it. And so it really helped me grow as a mountaineer and not just getting the photographs. So it's kind of serving dual purposes in some ways. Yeah.
Right. I hope your buddies felt that same appreciation that they were growing as mountaineers.
They did. But, it was just, well, pain is temporary. I'll just say that.
Okay.
And
hey, before we go to a quick break, I do want to go back to the star trails, because there is a shot in the book that is stunning. That was stunning, and I believe it was over Thousand Island Lake with Banner Peak, with star trails around Banner Peak, and then reflected in the water of Thousand Island Lake. That was just magnificent. Yeah,
that. So there are times when I do want star trails, and the only reason I'm not a huge fan of them sometimes is because it's so, that's not what your eye sees. And so I have a hard time doing them because I feel like people can't put themselves in that situation. So, but I thought I had an idea, I thought, well, if I take 15-minute exposure and get some star trails, and then take a quick exposure and stop them. So I blended exposures where it was like I took a standard picture of the Milky Way. So I had kind of these star trails sort of racing and then coming to a halt, is where I blended the second image in. And so it's I thought that was kind of a cool technique to try, and it worked out. But actually that night, this is one of the other stories I'll share. Do you want to go to a break real quick, or do you want me to share it?
Yeah, I think we should take a quick break, and we'll come back to this story. So stay tuned for that. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back. Now, before we went to break, you were just getting into another story. Let's hear what you got for us, Josh.
Yeah, at some point when you travel the mountains, you always have a bear encounter or some sort of wildlife encounter, I feel like. And this was close encounters, man. So that star trail shot we were talking about, I was out at 3 a.m. So, normal thing, except this time all my friends said, no, we're sleeping. And so I was out by myself and around Thousand Island Lake, and we were, I was out to one of the little jetties, and I was shooting, and I start backing up through some of the foliage there, and no joke, I ran right into a bear, just right in the area, doing its thing, scared the heck out of me. And I just see these eyes going up and down, making this noise, growling at me, and I'm going, oh my gosh, They always say, well, bears aren't going to hurt you or anything. But, I ran right into this guy and obviously startled him or her. And, he startled me. So I'm just backing up slowly, just like, oh, man, don't charge me. And I make it back to camp all right. And I sit by my tent. I'm still outside, just trying to recompose myself. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go back out there, get the shot. I'm just going to go to a different spot. So I go a little bit closer to camp this time. And I can spot the bear out there still. I can see him moving around in front of me on a different little island out on the lake. And so I'm like, okay, he's out there. So I start setting up for that star trail shot. And then I hear this splash. And I just see this head coming out of the water at me now. Now he's swimming over to the one that I'm on. I'm like, are you kidding me? What's going on? But for whatever reason, watching him swim through the water or her it just made me laugh, and I didn't feel like the bear cared about me at all at that point. So I just kept I went on to shoot, and it turned out to be a great shot. But it was that was a first for me. Just literally making contact with a bear while I was backing up was something that I soon will not forget. So.
Yeah, so you were backing up. You were backing up into the.
Yeah, I had my tripod.
As I remember the description, and yeah. you and the bear knocked butts, right? And
I think I ran into his face, actually.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Based on how he was facing when I saw him coming up and down at me, maybe he turned around real fast, but from what I can remember, to be honest, I don't know where I hit him, but regardless, yeah, I saw his face after that.
That is you can't get much closer encounter than that. That's pretty close.
You can't. Being alone was one of those things. It was just like, gosh, wildlife wasn't usually my concern, but it's one of those things. Don't hike alone, especially at night. Do your best to talk somebody into
it, which you do a very good job of.
Yeah,
most of the time.
Most of the time, yes.
Mm-hmm. So when exactly did you know that you had a book in your future?
Yeah, that came like probably second half of like the 10 years that book encompasses. I was developing a body of work at that point that I felt like I had to do something with. I didn't feel like posting on Instagram, or social media was really doing it justice to some of the stories behind the images, and not just that, but the images themselves, right? We are so tied to, these devices, our phones, and stuff kind of gets lost in there, no matter how good it is. You get in this pattern of scrolling through, and I just thought, I don't want that to be the end life of the work. And I wanted a platform where I could really tell in-depth stories about what it took to get this shot. And And that was funny. When the book came out, the first thing people told me is, I had no idea you had to go through that to get that shot. And I'm like, well, yeah, you know, these were uncommon shots. I don't think that a lot of these had ever been done before. And some of them, you know, certainly were. But you know, for the most part, I tried to take on things that I just never saw anybody do. And so from a photographer's standpoint, you know, I won't tell the story, but Horsetail Falls is a good example of that. Shot by thousands of photographers, and thought, well, I'm going to go shoot it from the face of El Cap and see what happens there. You know, it worked out. So, so I just didn't feel like, okay, cool, I got this post, you know, to go up on the internet. I didn't want that to be it. And honestly, we all love the wilderness experience of kind of checking out for a little bit, where you can sort of get away from the chaos of the world to some degree and kind of just get back to basics. And I felt like a book does that to you, regardless of whatever book you're reading. You know, you sort of have your attention span just on that. You have no ads on the right side bombarding you with things or whatnot, right? You can sort of close that out for a few moments and almost kind of get in that frame of mind that you get into when you're out in the wilderness. And so I thought it was important to put it in a platform such as a book. Yeah.
And let's talk about the structure of the book, the format. There are 10 chapters. And how did you decide to arrange those chapters and the format within the chapters?
So you were kind of cutting out a little bit there. It was 10 chapters and how I just tried and why I arranged them the way I did.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I would say, so I went through the idea. I thought I would do a location-based thing where I would say, like, maybe go along the John Muir Trail and say, okay, you know, this section to this section, that section to that section, sort of segment it that way with photos. But by the end of the project, you know, it was more than the John Muir Trail at that point. It encompassed a whole lot of things. So I didn't want people to feel like, oh, it was a book on the JMT, you know, because it's not. And it, so I had a hard time defining locations with that. And so I just kind of thought, well, there were so many years I did so many different locations, and I wanted to tell the story of me sort of changing as a person and developing not only as a photographer, but also as a mountaineer, and sort of that spiritual impact in my life taking shape over the years, and that maturity in all ways of climbing mountains, of traveling mountains, and of becoming a photographer. And chronologically, I thought was a really just authentic way of doing that, where people can sort of get an idea. Oh yeah, I remember my first backpacking trip where I was totally unprepared or something like that. And going into, you know, more serious alpinist stuff where like, oh yeah, that's a serious mountain and that's inspiring. And it's sort of, I don't know, just watching the development of a character, I think made it make sense chronologically for me. So
yeah, it was really nice to see the progression in all three of those areas. That really came across well. So
good. Yeah.
You were successful in that. Congratulations.
Thanks.
And what feedback have you gotten from folks on the book?
So far, it's all been really good. I'm waiting for a bad one. You know, I always get scared when I open a message up or an email up from somebody. You know, I'm like, okay, they went out of their way to contact me. Either the book's damaged, or I just think negatively at first. Like, I don't know why, I just do. Like, or they're gonna hate it, and I'm gonna have to give them their money back or something like that. So I. Every time I open it, it's just been, I just had to write to you, you know, this is so much more than I ever expected. And I think they're, you know, those who travel the Sierras pretty seriously, it's fun to hear them write to me because they know the areas and they know the shots right off the bat. Like, and they can tell, like, you went through a lot to get this. And, you know, thank you for sharing. And people are just, the quality of the book, honestly, is what's come through mostly in it, with this initial wow factor of just like, oh my gosh, it's a brick. And then you open it up and the pictures and the stories, they don't read the stories, you know, right away, but it's I think it's the photos, the impact that they have on them as looking through them. And that's the difference that you don't get on a phone device. You know, when you scroll down and you see photos that big, when you open the book, you see them bigger than your monitor. And I think that initial impact has been the biggest point of feedback from people. And it's been really encouraging, man. I got to say, like, when you put yourself out there like that, I mean, you do it with a podcast, but, you leave yourself kind of vulnerable in some ways. Like I said in the beginning, if you don't like it, just keep that to yourself.
Right.
But
Yes.
That's a real thing. It's kind of like you're putting your passion out there for others to enjoy, but also others to critique in some way. And so, it goes with the territory. And so far, it's all been really positive. And honestly, like, it's gotten me. I've met some of my heroes from it too. Chris Burkhardt is a photographer I really enjoy. I've always enjoyed his storytelling. He does a lot of surf stuff, but I think the way he presents his stuff is really well done. And he actually helped me finish the book out a little bit. And I reached out to him, and that was a really cool thing for me to kind of have him be a part of that for me, the making of the book. He didn't have to do that, but he did anyway. And then going to his studio and meeting him and talking to him about it after it was done was a fun experience for me. And then mountain guide in the Sierras, who I'd met once on the Mountaineers route, my first time up in the winter. His name's Kurt Wedberg. Giving him a book and hearing his feedback on it was really special to me too. So he knows the Sierras probably better than anybody, and to have him write me an email and just tell me how much he's enjoyed it and how much of a work of art it is, we called it. That was pretty cool. So yeah.
Outstanding. And now we've whipped our listeners up into a frenzy, and they want to buy this book. So how can they find this book? How can they acquire this?
Sure. Yeah. The easiest way is to go to my website, which is just joshendres.com. You can find that through my Instagram profile, which is, as you mentioned earlier, JMTI. And, but it's easy. You just go to the website, you get the book, and it'll take you through the steps, and I'll ship it out as soon as I can. So, which is usually the same day or the next day. So yeah.
Okay. Now, can I pin you down for your top 3 shooting locations in the Sierras? What are the top 3 areas you like to photograph in the Sierras?
Yeah. Got to narrow it down to 3. Obviously, I mentioned the Palisades. I would say that was number 1 for me.
Okay.
Mainly because of the ruggedness, and I felt like it hadn't been. It wasn't overly photographed, if photographed at all. And so, photographing even not just the traverse, but in the book, I show pictures of the glaciers there and capturing those under good lighting, and then even the North Fork under some incredible sunsets. That was a lot of fun for me. Palisades would be right up there. And, I would say, oh yeah, for sure. The other location was like so kind of like northeastern Yosemite. So in Tuolumne a little bit, but even more eastern than that. I have a shot in the book, and locations have a way of, right, they resonate with different people for different reasons. And, Saddlebag is a place that borders Yosemite National Park on the eastern side there, and it's home to a pretty great traverse between North Peak and Mount Conness. And I hadn't done North Peak. I did Conness in the book, and I wanted a picture of that basin because that was where I first really started experimenting with off-trail terrain. 11 years ago, it was Saddlebag. And then my kids, each year, my wife and I will take them out on a backpacking trip. And they're getting older. Mine's not 22. I have 3 of them, 8, and my daughter will turn 6, and then 3. So 8, 6, and 3. Watching them grow and have a love for the outdoors, whether it's fishing or learning how to backpack, makes a location pretty special for me. So that has happened in the Saddlebag area where we take them back there and camp next to the lakes. And so that was one of the last photograph in the book was this picture from Mount Conness, overlooking those lakes we camp at. And so that would be, and they're just beautiful. The glacial color in those lakes is awesome. Same with the North Fork lakes. So Saddlebag, Palisades. Lastly, let's see here. If I had to pick a third location, the Evolution Range. Yeah. Through the JMT, it's beautiful. It's beautiful back there. The Inconsolable Range is nice too, but I consider that it's so close to the Palisades. I kind of consider it one and the same. So, but the Evolution Range, even on both sides of the main ridge there is so beautiful. Out of Sabrina and then back in the JMT. Yeah.
Got it. 3 epic locations. Fantastic.
Yeah. Remote. The more remote, usually the more I like it. So
Agreed. Something about those remote locations. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hey, Josh, you know where we are?
Where?
We're at that time of the episode where I turn to you and ask you for your pro tip insight of the week. What little piece of wisdom can you share with our listeners to make their next outdoor experience even better?
Okay. Yeah, you mentioned you were going to say this in the beginning of the show.
I did.
All right. Here's what it is. No matter, I think being in good shape is a good way to go. So we all, not all, but many of us have full-time jobs or whatever. We're trying to pay the bills. And so we have our time consumed, or we're parents, and that happens too. And so at least that's the stage I'm at now. But regardless, I would say the pro tip would be to keep yourself in shape. And by doing that, work within your schedule. So like what I do is I work in this office, and I create like a little makeshift stand-up desk with like a box, and I wear my backpack every day, and I walk around with it. And I was doing yard work out there today. I wear my backpack, and what it does over time, that you will be so much more prepared by doing those little things. I mean, I think those are more important than I run a lot, but doing that, just wearing a backpack day in and day out, is so much more important for like comfortable mountain travel. If you can make that second nature, that weight, I think that's huge. And then you said, well, that was one pro tip, but I guess are we going to do something that I was dying to tell you?
Yes.
That we didn't. Okay.
Yes.
I'll save that for later.
We'll get there. But
pro tip of the week. Yeah.
You sold me with that pro tip. I'm going to wear my backpack to work each day now.
You should. Yeah.
Just going to show up to
when we went to the office. Yeah, I would walk to work in my backpack, and it just became second nature because I did it with camera equipment. I had to make sure that having a camera in my hand was just totally a natural feeling for me. And so yeah, same idea.
Okay, fantastic. So there you have it. That's it. This episode is almost in the books. Hope our listeners enjoyed our time with Josh. I want to thank him for joining us this week. Josh, how can our listeners keep up with you on social media, and where can they find updates on your latest adventures?
Yeah, so right now on social media, the only one I have is Instagram. It's the only one I really use. I don't update maybe as much as I should, but I try to keep things moving for the most part, keep it consistent. So that's JMT Guy. We've said that a few times on there. Hopefully that's easy to remember. I'm a nice guy. You can reach out to me with any questions. I'm happy to answer. I love interacting with people. So that's probably the best way to keep in touch with me and keep honestly with the latest. I don't run a blog on my website. So, nothing there unless you really wanted to order something or email me. But yeah, or find me out in the mountains, and I'll be happy to talk to you there too.
Okay. Remember to check out the pod on social media as well. We are on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter, and now TikTok. And if you have comments or clips you want to share, you can send it to me at johnfreakinmuir@gmail.com. Josh, I'm also looking to you to share your recommendation for a book, a movie, documentary, website, YouTube channel, some kind of media that's going to help our listeners stay connected to the outdoor adventures. We're calling this our outdoor media recommendation. What do you have for us?
Right. Mm-hmm. So I'm a big book guy. I like the other forms of media as well. But I like the book for reasons I mentioned earlier of just sort of drowning out everything else and focusing on the thing at hand. my book. No, I'm just kidding.
We'll stipulate your book should be at the top of the list. But in addition to your book,
just trying to throw that in there. No, I would say I mentioned it earlier. I'll give 3 recommendations, mainly that inspired me. One was the guidebook. The best guidebook I think for the Sierras ever written is R.J. Sikor's The High Sierra. It will tell you every route possible on summits, and it's such a good foundation to have and take with you, or make photocopies of when you're out there. So I would highly recommend that to anybody serious about Sierra travel. Secondly, going back to kind of my philosophy in photography, the sort of the art found in nature. I think I mentioned him earlier, but Chris Burkhardt put out a book titled At Glacier's End. And it was about all the glacial rivers in Iceland that he photographed, really, I think all of them aerial shots. And it gave this whole new perspective on like the land and just the abstract artistry behind that. It was really came through really well in that. And so just from that perspective of like looking at nature as manifested like art by a creator it was pretty awesome to see those shots come through. It was really unique and a creative project that spoke volumes about the art and nature. And then third, as a photographer, Galen Rowell really helped me. He was a Sierra photographer. He's an international photographer. He died, I believe early 2000s. I think. Don't quote me on that. But at any rate, he used to have a gallery in Bishop that's been taken down now, unfortunately. But he wrote a book called The Inner Game of Landscape Photography. And if you're interested in any kind of landscape photography, I think that's a good place to start, because you find out what it takes to really get those, as we keep mentioning, million-word shots. And I remember specifically Evolution Lake. He waited 9 days just there for a sunset that he got just in that one spot, you know. And so it kind of speaks volumes of, you got to get to a place, but then that's only half the battle. So, yeah.
Those are 3 outstanding recommendations. Thank you.
Sure.
And as you foreshadowed, before we wrap things up, our final segment is called "What Have I Not Asked You That You're Dying to Tell Me About?"
Yeah, what was I going to say? Did I write it down? Let me see if I wrote it down here. I would say, oh yeah. We were talking about the keeping in shape and all that. You know, I think it's easy to get sidetracked as we get older. Some of us have kids, we have jobs and things like that. And I mentioned the conditioning part of that. You know, but I think that plays a role. Like, don't give up on, you know, your outdoor dreams or those personal project dreams. I think, you know, even with me, full-time gig and have my own thing going too, and having kids and all that, like, it still was possible to do all this stuff. And I really just want to say, like, you know, it's easy to surround ourselves with like what the world throws at you, but don't, you know, surround yourself with good people. And I think make time for that, because you mentioned like what keeps you inspired, like media that would inspire you, but having friends that, you know, who are into this stuff and meeting with them on a regular basis, that is huge. And that is honestly a big part of what keeps me motivated. I mean, I have lunch with guys every week who, you know, they're out doing stuff more than me these days, you know, and we have to share stories. And that is like, you know, it gets ideas and motivation in me. And reach out to the pros. Like, communication is so easy these days. Like I mentioned Chris Burkhardt, I just emailed him and he got back to me. And it was like, oh, dude, you're like, okay, cool, you know? And I hired, I don't know if you're going to ask this, but like part of what's coming in the future for me is finishing that Palisade Traverse, or at least maybe not. I'm looking for a shot, right? It's always about the shot I'm looking for. So I'm actually looking for a shot from Starlight Peak along the Traverse. We're probably going to spend the night up there. And I'd like to get somebody on that, what we call the milk bottle, It's a 5-7 climb up that, and someone at night under the Milky Way on that. And so I was like, I reached out to Kurt Wedberg, who's a mountain guide, and I was like, hey man, is this possible? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, I'll hook you up with this guy. So I'm meeting with a guy named Ross Hill. He's a great mountain guide, and we're going to try to make this happen. But I mean, like, if you're interested in going to that next level, I just, like, there's so many ways to do it. And even if you're a beginner, again, like, there's so many avenues you could take now to make stuff like this happen. And all I would say is, if you feel like there's an opportunity there, don't pass it up. Because, like, no matter how busy you are, you'll find that you had time for it. Yeah.
Thank you, Josh. And you just stumbled across the reason for this podcast's existence. It's a way for me to talk with like-minded people and to touch base with experts occasionally. So that's exactly right. Fantastic.
Yeah, that's good, man. That's good.
Well, that is a wrap from the John Freaking Muir studio. Any shout outs to friends and family, Josh?
Well, I don't want to miss anybody, but certainly my wife and my kids, they make it possible, and they're a big part of the inspiration in the work I do. And my parents and my in-laws have always helped out a lot in this project by busing us a lot around, picking us up at trailheads and whatnot. And all my buddies who have been on me on the trips, they know who they are, and you know how much I love you guys, and you're a bunch of dirtbags, but I love you anyway. And in a good way, we're just all dirt. I don't mean like in a bad way.
That's right.
But anyway, that would be, those guys, all of them, I won't name everybody, but yeah.
Fantastic. You do a good job of naming them in the book at the very end. And of course, we would not be successful without our support staff. So very wise
Absolutely.
of you to recognize your wife in that shout out.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you for tuning in. Always remember, the trail is the trail. It doesn't care if you want to go downhill. It doesn't care if it's almost dark and you're looking for a campsite. It doesn't even care if you back into a bear during a 3 a.m. alpine photo shoot. The trail is the trail. Embrace the suck.